We're here today with John Woodford, a longtime journalist and an editor who's had experience on a lot of different publications and now a commentator. John, recently we mentioned to each other about the terminology being used for the January 6th rioting at the U.S. Capitol, such as insurrection, rebellion, sedition, etc., etc. And you take somewhat exception to the use of those kinds of terms.
Yes, when you hear various news outfits, different stations, all of a sudden using the same terminology, mainly NPR and CNN, particularly MSNBC, BBC, various others. All of a sudden, the word insurrection seems to be what they use. It reminded me of the way that they deemed riots. I'd have to say that what happened in, let's say, Detroit or Watts, these things, they call them rebellions. But I'm afraid to say that rebellion, to me, requires some planning and objectives and strategy and tactics and an organized body with a political purpose. So calling a riot a rebellion may dignify it in the eyes of some, but when we look at the results of it, we see that it aren't rebellions. They're just outbursts of of rage. So they are, they're riots, but it's not to say that they are inexplicable, or some could even say the rage is justified. Whatever rage, when people riot, there's no, it's like cork popping out of a bottle. So whatever put that pressure on them caused it. People don't just riot out of the blue. But anyway, this terminology of insurrection implies, again, a clear political purpose. It requires planning, gauging of whether they met, who were they going after? An insurrection against one of the best armed government that has ever been on the face of the earth, that we know it. And you're going to send a few hundred people in, and you're going to call that an insurrection against that government? That's not an insurrection.
They also called it quite a bit label of white supremacy, driven by white supremacy, and the people there were white supremacists, bigots, and racists. How do you respond to those terms?
They do have a lot of those people there, but they're not. They were an element, and probably a very, they could be a very active or a violent element. Any people who take violence as their political mode are going to act up in a place like that. But we do know that there were people from minority ethnic groups and stuff there too. So it's not again, that's why to call it an insurrection is not a clear body. You have people who are ticked off for one reason or another. You have some who have a motive, who have some kind of political motives, and others, you have people there who were kind of on a family outing, and you have a variety of real ragtag. It's not even like the Boston Tea Party, let's say.
Which it was compared to, by the way, by Don Lemon on CNN, that this is the way the country started, the Boston Tea Party, et cetera, et cetera. So there's hyperbole throughout the media.
Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous, really. So sure, we do know. We look at the ideology of people who've done various numbers of atrocities. We have various kinds of local equivalents to Taliban-type backward thinkers in our country, and not all from one background or group, but our country has its own peculiar racist history, and that's always going to be in play. But it's not the only thing that's at play.
There is also a lot of calls to prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law, which is reasonable. But what they're trying to do is label them with sedition charges. AOC accused Ted Cruz of trying to murder him, et cetera, et cetera. So, what do you make of the kind of charges that they're claiming should apply to the quote insurrectionists?
It sets a very dangerous pattern and precedent, because if you can label people who are rioting as seditionists, and or insurrectionists, that in our legal system these call for penalties, and they also excuse repressive tactics by the government, because if the government can say that it's under attack by insurrectionists, then they can take a lot of people's rights away, legal rights and others. So it's not something to be thrown around loosely. And then what I think some of the people like AOC and others, they don't seem to realize that the precedent they set can be used against them by someone else who opposes them later on. And that's why you don't want to be loosely taking away people's rights, their legal rights, the rights to their First Amendment rights, all of these things that can be taken away in times of emergency. When you do it lightly, it's going to happen to you the next time the shoe's on the other foot. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah, and in fact, John, although I know you have a long history of fighting for civil rights, you're strong on that, but yet you seem to be taking a serious, thoughtful look at what actually occurred and how it's being depicted. Now, what do you make of the Biden administration, where it seems like every day they're bringing up race? They're talking about white supremacy. Biden said, the stain of white supremacy on America must stop. John Brennan, former CIA director, the other day said he is ashamed to be a white male. I mean, there's so much brought up constantly by Biden and his administration about race. What's going on? What do you make of that, and is it good or bad?
Well, I don't know whether these people are neurotic or the danger is that when you imply or accuse any people from any background as having any wholesale quality, negative or positive, but in this case it's usually negative, as if because of their their identity there's something tainted about them, that's fundamentally a racist attitude. And I don't know, it's also very divisive. How are they going to build a unified country if they're going to say that some people are supposed to come into this unity and hat in hand and say, mea culpa, there's something wrong with me, I was born with a sin or a stain on me, because it's so crazy. I think it's very opportunistic. It's kind of a vote pandering stance, but I don't know if they're smart enough to realize how dangerous it is. I don't know how stupid they are or how opportunistic, but it doesn't make sense. You can't have a unity if you're going to have that approach. And it's just lip service often, because when it comes to really helping people, if they really had this attitude, well, then I would think that they would be very systematic in, let's say, funding I think it's the minimum wage, for example, or people's right to organize, the union legislation that would give all working people a right to bargain and organize much easier. They're kind of restrained from doing it in our country more than any other developed country. So if you were really for poor people, black people, the others that you're mouthing that you're for, you would do this sort of thing first. But what do they do first? The same thing they did with the Clintons and Obama. They come up with sex identity legislation, which is and they seem to pat themselves on the back, And that's what they do, and then they point to that, oh look, and then the rest of the stuff they can't do. And of course, the stuff that they do is, again, nutty. I mean, how are you going to have a situation where you're going to say that people who declare themselves males or females, they declare themselves females, but they could have the physiology of a male, and then they can go into the women's bathrooms or play on a sports team, and this is called some kind of progressive breakthrough. I mean, it's lunacy.
John, there are those who make the argument that the reason, part of the reason why they're pushing such extremism, such political correctness, touching the buttons of those who voted for Trump and maybe even Democrats who voted for Biden, but are not on board with all this extreme application of things. That part of the reason they're doing that is that they want to have a number of people, groups radicalize and turn to violence, and therefore that would provide another excuse to crack down with repressive measures. Do you think that's part of the formula here?
Well, I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, whichever those groups are, I'm not quite sure whom they're trying to tick off most. But what happens, for example, they've promised get rid of, reduce or severely lower student higher education debt, which they could do. And the same with the minimum wage. When they come into power, all of a sudden these are the things which they start coming before you. I just saw what's his name, who comes on CNN to say that Bernie's call for minimum wage is unrealistic. All of a sudden what becomes unrealistic are the very things they promised to get their voting majority. The student debt, very popular. The minimum wage, raising that, very popular. Labor union rights. All the things that they then all of a sudden they say realistically we can't do it. Or, for example, they hid behind the ruling of the parliamentarian on the minimum wage. Now, I happen to think that the minimum wage hike shouldn't be sneaked in a back door of a major bill. I think they should. A minimum wage hike is important enough to be fought for, if you believe in it, right out in the open and argue for that specifically. It doesn't need to be page 580 of a 600-page item, and then you abandon it. So I find that kind of a cowardly approach, and one I think that was phony in the first place, because both parties, when it came to giving the military a huge amount of billions upon hundreds of billions, they got together and did it within a day, pretty much.
Well, that brings me to the next area of inquiry with you. Considering the type of spending that they're doing, and considering the Biden administration's connection with Wall Street and the big corporations, they're indebted to them with campaign contributions, with lobbyists, all kinds of links there. And Biden with the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, where with emails that seem to establish that the kid was trying to arrange meetings with his father to get influence, and he and the son were handsomely rewarded for that. Considering all of that kind of approach to catering and linking themselves to the big money and special interests, how different is a Biden administration going to be from Trump and from Obama and others, Clinton, others before them? How different is it going to be in terms of really taking a socially responsible direction to improve the lot of the ordinary person, working class people especially? Is it really going to be any difference when you get past the lip service?
It doesn't look like it. I would say I would like to be proved wrong. I think we seem to see a parade of presidents. Some came in who were silver spoon rich people. They still line their pockets, but they're already quite wealthy. You have Kennedys and Bushes, and then you have wannabe ones like Clintons, and to come in and time for them to line their pockets. Obama, I think his presidency looks to me more like a money-making investment than anything else. I don't think he really intended to do all that much. And it may be, when you get in there, who knows who's behind the scenes in our society, that you'd have to be pretty courageous, but you'd also have to have a very good political organization to go against them on certain measures. But yeah, I'd say that Wall Street is happy with these types in there. And I don't, and Biden, we don't see anything in his past to indicate that he's going to do anything except talk. I'm just Joe Blow. I love union guys. I love workers. And I'm one of them. But there's nothing in his career to show that that's who he represents. He's like the man from DuPont or whatever was backing him. I don't know what was backing him back then. And of course, that money deal that he was doing to his son, that's what I say. That's more like a wannabe. They want to line their pockets. The Obamas did more through the publishing industry, which is more in a more elite and classy kind of pocket lining. But I guess they and then Trump, of course, is more just sort of naked lust for profit, where you can get it. But one after the other, that's what we're getting in our country.
Yeah, considering the pandering, I think we both agree on that. Largely pandering to minority groups, special interest groups, et cetera, in order to get their vote. Considering how they're constantly doing that, and considering how this continues to enrage the white voter, do you think this approach now is really a setback to the improvement of race relations, or is it actually going to improve them, as Biden seems to be promising?
Well, you can't improve anything just by preachy statements about how you love, togetherness and unity, and you love the flag, or let's all get together. That doesn't mean anything. It's where the rubber meets the road. What are they going to do with the jobs, the training? I mean, now this whole pandemic thing, it's looking like partly like a scheme for different pharmaceutical companies to. It's like they've been cut out. The military was there under the udder of the golden calf, and now others are saying, let us in there. It's time for us to get a suck. And they're going to load up at the public trough. And then it's like a competition between different financial and economic and commodity producing interests in the country. I'm hoping, I would like to see them actually take measures where they restore manufacturing capacity in this country, train people, have programs that train kids in high school and junior college and colleges for the jobs that should be coming here, and have something like that. But I don't see them doing it. And meanwhile, as you say, there's a lot of divisive talk. Like, let's take reparations, which they also waive. Everything they waive, there's got to be reparations. I don't think that there is anything that the less well-off, or many in the Black community, need that's directed just for them. I think if you have a wage program, jobs program, invest in public education, invest in rebuilding infrastructure. I mean, our water systems in our country alone, to restore them, replace them, would be many, many, many jobs. These are the kinds of programs that will lift up people out of poverty. And they don't have to be ethnic oriented. They don't have to say, you're doing this to repair, to make up for slavery.
Equity rather than equality.
Yeah.
Equity now.
Yeah, they don't have to do that. They don't have to do that. But their investments are often in these low-wage countries.
Hmm.
The investments of the people who are funding both parties, and I'm afraid that the lobbyists write so much of our social and economic legislation. They write it and hand it to the congressman. Of course, the congressmen are in a system where they'd rather be in Congress than have an actual real job, but it means they got to make a lot of money while they're there.
Yeah.
So our system is set up for them to be corrupt.
Right.
And uh,
And upon leaving office,
we need to recognize the mess we're in if we're going to get out of it.
the same people in government and the regulatory agencies that regulated those industries favorably then get a job in those industries when they leave office. So, the fix is in.
Yeah, and it's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
So,
John, what do you make of the way the media is suppressing stories, killing stories, won't allow things to be reposted? Again, the Hunter Biden laptop story is one of the most egregious recent examples. But it goes on and on now. Where if you don't ascribe to the corporate or the party line, a lot of the stuff that you do won't be allowed to be posted on the internet. Perhaps even what we're doing now may be censored. So, what do you make of this trend? And are you as alarmed about it as I am? We both have backgrounds in journalism.
oh yeah, we the numbers of people who can learn and hear about some information is vital. You have millions and millions of people, so if you're just kept out in the boonies of discourse, then you won't be heard. But not only that, now, as you say, they're actually taking things off or barring things from getting on. And these so-called, they call themselves liberals, but I consider it's reactionary and it's authoritarian for us to say that Facebook or Bill Gates or any of these other kinds of people, that they should be allowed to determine what people are allowed to read and hear and learn. And it's in the textbooks, but it's so absurd. I mean, look, Dr. Seuss, you can't have a Dr. Seuss book because and they're going to decide that something is so hurtful that they had drew a picture of someone with Asiatic eyes, and therefore you got to get rid of that book. Where can it stop?
Yeah.
You know.
How do you depict a person of Asian origin without showing some of the facial features that are typical of Asians?
Right. And so once you decide that it's automatically an insult, what you're telling the people, whether there's Asian features or African features or whatever, you're telling them that in and of themselves, these things are ugly, or inferior, or offensive. And that you're telling them that they should be ashamed of their own identity. There's something wrong with it.
John, let me ask you a very sensitive question here. Now, your analysis, I think, is very objective, even-handed. You look at both sides and come up with your own conclusions. The fact that you are black, wouldn't you be accused, and maybe you already have been over the years, of being a sellout, an Uncle Tom, if I could use that phrase? How come you're not standing up more firmly for the black cause?
I have, you might say, I have the bona fides that would be hard for them to deal with. Because since I did start working at Ebony and Jet, my first places I worked, I also worked with the black Muslims for 4 years. And they were upset. I wasn't a member, but I worked with them, and I had a great time on that paper because mainly it was during the Vietnam War. I wanted to work someplace where I could cover not only the Vietnam War, being opposed to that war, but also the national liberation movements in the Third World. So that's why I worked there. But so I got along with them quite well. I went all around the country. I covered the Black Panthers and other stuff. So I have seen all the black stuff that could have been seen for the last 50 or 60 years in Mississippi and elsewhere. So if they would have people have a hard time to try to put that kind of a label on me.
Considering,
I'm,
go ahead, John.
I'm gonna have to call stop. And I believe that, I'm kind of old fashioned. I think the truth will come to the top. The truth will help people. There's no reason to make up stuff, deny stuff, or to follow absurd kind of fantasy sort of politics of pseudo-revolutionary talk, as if let's say hip hop. I don't want to condemn it all, but let's say hip hop and as a style, they said it's a way of life. But I got to say, a form of culture that screams about doing damage to people and especially to women and other stuff. Am I going to say that this is revolutionary culture? No, I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean,
It isn't, and we can see what has it led to. What are these things leading to? I don't see any appreciable progress, except through the only progress made is when we had programs that were helping poor people sincerely, not through just like a handout thing, but through educational programs, access to education, housing legislations, things that I think the country in general, the country has had a history of bigotry and prejudice, but it also has a history of people coming to grips and overcoming, getting over prejudices.
Yeah, John, considering what's been going on now, especially in the past few years, I mean, political correctness has been engaged in for a long time now. The college professors, I think brainwashed their students, this is accelerating and intensifying, and now with the media censorship, what direction do you see us headed in? Because both white kids and people of color, youth of color, are both subjected to the same repression of information modes that they're putting out there now. So with this kind of non-access to real information and a broad field of information to sift through to come to your own conclusions, this is affecting both white kids and people and kids of color. So, are we headed towards a less unified society, or is this just going to accelerate the division and the disintegration of American society as we know? In the next 10 years, what's going to happen?
Well, we do know that in some countries, they've gone through periods of complete nuttiness from, the Chinese after Mao had that goofy period. The French Revolution, they had a period of nutty psycho behavior.
Yeah.
And so with the wrong kind of crisis, whether it's socioeconomic or military or who knows what, or even climactic, the way we're going now, it's hard to predict how people, we've had many people talk about the loosening or the dissolution of bonds that hold communities together, even communities that are, sort of even of a kind, you might say. Rural communities have been torn asunder, and factory. We don't have people working in factories and stuff the way people of many different backgrounds work in factories. their unions together. They did this and that. They even had, their political parties and wards and councils. I mean, we have such a dissolution of that kind of cohesion, and things that the computer and the internet have stepped in. Now they're being controlled more and more.
So therefore, are you pessimistic or optimistic about the future?
Pessimistic.
We agree there. We agree there.
Yeah, I'm ready to be surprised, but I'm looking around. I can't figure out yet where it would come from. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to come from. It's I mean, it's insane, the stuff we see every day, of whether you call it cancel culture, PC. But I mean, these are, when this happens among some of the most educated sectors of our society,
Right.
who ought to be able, you would hope, think a little bit straight and be able to know better. And when they don't and can't, you have to figure your society is really, it has a mess on its hands. Because unfortunately, too, the ones who own these enterprises and who are at the top of the universities, own the networks, own the newspapers, they're going along with these people. They cave into them. They're firing people right and left. I mean, every day, every week, the New York Times has about 2 or 3 stories of an absurd PC firing of some kind. You maybe have seen the most recent one. It was either at Smith or Mount Holyoke College, where did you read that story about the student? The student decided that someone had done something racist against her. Right. She was in a building where you weren't supposed to be, and if someone told her to leave the building,
Right.
that person gets fired, and 2 or 3 other people get fired. Even people who weren't there get fired. They lose their jobs for telling a student that she's not supposed to be eating in a building. And I mean, that's nutty.
It's kind of like the Cultural Revolution in China and in other where you had to confess abjectly, you had you had to and then be sent to constant retraining, re-education camps. Well, we got that going on now, where you're required with these sensitivity classes that you have to take if you've offended anybody.
Mm-hmm. The crazy thing here is, at least in China, I'll say, at least they had, at least they were in a group. They had some kind of collective.
Yeah.
So even though they were nutty, maybe they could come out of it a little bit. I mean, here, just one, it's like you only need one person, one screwball person, to decide that you did this or that, and then the rest of the ones cave in. And
John, why do you think that is? I mean, considering the power that the corporations have and the monopoly on their products and services, they don't have to do that. Why are they doing that at the risk of alienating millions of people that don't go along with this?
Well, one thing, the atmosphere that we're left with is one where no one will want to pipe up to say anything to stir another person's mind. So it's a great silencing. It's a silencing of any kind of first dissent, expression of it, and then after a while they'll be squelching even people's thinking about something serious enough to want to dissent. It's
there's already self-censorship with people posting things on the internet.
Yeah, and but of course, what they're going to find out is stuff's going to be driven underground, and it will fester.
Yeah. And
when it comes out, it's going to be nastier and uglier than normal. You suppress stuff like that, it just will turn rotten.
Yeah, what they're doing is setting the stage for the type of real rebellion that they claim they're trying to stop now through censorship.
Yeah, Yeah, yeah. And the fact that they, well, it's what's in it for them. You just got to say that their means of control of the communication technology and institutions, they're going to say that's why they need to have even more power, more
It also kind of gives them a diversion of anybody going after corporations. You
control.
notice the Biden administration is not going near any of their abuses. They're not talking about breaking up the monopolies, using existing laws on the books where they could control monopolies.
Mm-mm.
None of that, because there's so many people from Wall Street, so many people from special interest groups that are now part of the Biden administration.
Hmm. And of course, they don't want taxes to be restructured. I mean, we know that over the last 40, 50 years, the taxes that the super rich have got, they pay less and less, and yet nothing's being done about it. The so and and this tremendous shift of wealth, which they measure, and you can see all the charts,
Right.
huge shift. Uh, Obviously, that's got something to do with the difficulties we're in, but you don't hear that in Congress. You don't hear them talking about it much.
So, John, wrapping this up now, I guess we're leaving on a pessimistic note that we both share in terms of where we're going.
Yeah, I hope that I'm hoping that there would be some form of comedians and comics. I mean, they they are counting on them too much in this country in a way because now they're becoming PC.
Yeah,
Comedians are becoming PC. Now, what was great was when the guy from Saturday Night Live, he made the joke about Israel not giving any shots to the Palestinians. And even though it subsequently was shown that that was a pretty good jibe because it was not an exaggeration. He had to do the crawl, take the walk of shame, apologize. And so you're wondering, this is a chance for the comedians to kind of fight back. And if they go under, if only, when Trump was in, oh yeah, they had a field
yeah,
day.
yeah.
Now with Biden in, there's a kind of a way that the attacks that they have on Biden, it's more like a friendly lampooning of a doddering uncle.
Yeah.
They're not getting at the substance of his politics in the humor yet. And I wonder if they will, because if they don't, then we're even worse shape than I even think we're in. Because if they don't take them on, if he becomes a sacred cow with his politics, and of course partly he partly is. I mean, here he goes and bombs. Like when they come in, who are we gonna bomb? Wondering the new president's got to attack somebody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a frat party test. They got to wipe out. They got to pick the right spot, kill the right people in the right place, and give a rationale. But it's a very dangerous, very dangerous ritual the country is going through when it just can think it can strut around the world and bomb people as to prove how tough you are, how manly, what a strong country.
John Woodford, a longtime journalist and person who served on various editorial positions. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll do this again.
Okay, man, my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John.